conservative, constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, tragedy struck northern Kentucky with a shooting, but the background information on the shooting leaves one only to ask how long till our Kentucky legislature finally impeaches some horrible, awful judges. Eastern Kentucky's got a lot of issues. One of them is not electric vehicle chargers. However, the Beshear administration is determined to solve that non-existent problem, while tons of real issues still remain in Eastern Kentucky. Then finally, long after COVID's been over in many people's minds, now almost 3 years later, many people, yours truly, but also others, are still experiencing ramifications from that, including one gentleman who lost his position within a fire department in Kentucky, having a hearing on that. We'll have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Before I dig down into it, please make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe. If you're listening to this on the podcast version, make sure you leave a review. It's the simplest, easiest thing you can do. If you leave a review, it helps the search algorithms boost us up there. And especially if you can leave a review saying things like a written review that says things like, oh, great conservative Kentucky political podcast, like something like that, those keywords, that helps the algorithm, and it helps both Spotify, Apple, iHeart. When people are searching for Kentucky political podcast, it will help it show up higher, and that'll cause natural and organic growth. So that's the one thing you could do for me. Leave a review and make sure in your review you mention some of those keywords like Kentucky, conservative, Republican, podcast, to make sure we drive more listeners to listen to the show every day. And as always, if you want to reach out to the show, feel free to email info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. You can also head on over to theandrewshow.com and hit the contact tab. If you want to reach out to the show, it'll open up a form and you can go ahead and do that. So a few days ago, there's a shooting in northern Kentucky. This from the Cincinnati Enquirer. 4 killed, 3 injured at Northern Kentucky house party. What we know. Here's what we know about a mass shooting in Florence early Saturday that left 4 people dead and 3 wounded. The shooter also died. Police have identified the shooter as 21-year-old Chase Garvey, a Florence resident. They believe he turned the gun on himself a short time after the shooting and died at a local hospital. During a press conference Saturday, Florence Police Chief Jeff Mallory said Garvey is believed to have gunned down 7 people at the private residence, killing 4, injuring 3 others. It was during a birthday party at the home at the 2600 block of Ridgecrest Drive around 2:50 a.m. Officers performed life-saving measures on the victims, but 4 died at the scene. 3 others were wounded and taken to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. As of Saturday, Mallory said they were in stable condition and expected to make a full recovery. What happened to the shooter? Partygoers identified the suspect as Garvey. Police said he fled in the vehicle after the shooting. Officers pursued him on South 42 into Union and on to Hicks Pike. Police said that they believe he shot himself, which caused him to crash the vehicle. Garvey was taken to St. Elizabeth Florence Hospital, where he died. Initial investigation by police found Garvey acted alone. Who were the victims? The 4 killed were Melissa Pratt, 44 of Florence, Shane Miller, 20 of Florence, Hayden 20 of Ellesmere, and Delaney Erie, 19 of Burlington. Parrott, who was nicknamed Missy, worked at Toyota Bushuku America in Erlanger for over 8 years, a company spokesperson told the Enquirer. Missy's commitment, hard work, and positive attitude has left a lasting impact on all of us. We extend our heartfelt condolences to Missy's children, family, and loved ones during this difficult time, the company said in a statement. Paris Miller, whose brother Shane died in the shooting, said he was a beautiful soul and remembered for his kindness and sense of adventure. If he wasn't spending time with loved ones, he was out in nature with a fishing pole in his hand. I want them all to know how loving and caring he was, how much he loved everybody close to him. This is not Garvey's first encounter with law enforcement. Kenton County court records show he was arrested in 2021 and charged in the rape of a 13-year-old girl. 2021, arrested for rape a 13-year-old girl. Then in 2023, Garvey was sentenced to 5 years of probation after he pleaded guilty to unlawful transaction with a minor in a second degree, a felony court records show. And so this is what it's really about. Robbie Starbuck actually made a Twitter post about the shooter's background, because this is what is important. This is where the people of Kentucky need to be asking right now their entire legislatures why Kathleen Lape will not be impeached. Because I promise you this, I almost promise you, nobody in the legislature will try, well, not nobody, because we have some great people coming in. I'm sure several people will try to impeach Kathleen Lape. I'm sure some people from Northern Kentucky, because the shooting happened in Northern Kentucky, where we have some good, strong conservative reps. So I'm sure they will actually file an impeachment petition against Kathleen Lape. However, I don't think it'll go anywhere. But it really should. So Robbie Starbuck posted some stuff about this. Here was his post where he was talking about the shooter here, this Chase Garvey, and his criminal background. Because really, most of this can be laid at the feet of Kathleen Lape, the judge. Okay? So Robbie Starbucks tweets out, expect to hear very little about the shooting in Kentucky from this week. Here's why. 7 people were shot, and it appears this was only possible because a left-wing judge named Kathleen Lape gave a child rapist probation and no jail time. The shooter is reportedly Chase Garvey. He's a convicted child rapist who once lured a 13-year-old from Snapchat to rape her. Left-wing judge Kathleen Lape gave him only 5 years of probation. But it gets even worse, though, because she had a second chance to jail him. So she first gives him 5 years probation. I'm sure he promised he'd be a really good boy. Then he violates that probation, and she still only gives him now 30 days in county jail. And she could have given him a full 5-year sentence. He should have been sentenced much worse than that from the start, but even just enforcing his full 5-year jail sentence for violating probation would have saved 7 people from being shot, and 4 people wouldn't be dead right now. This is what that piece of trash who killed 4, injured 3, this is what he did that got him only 5 years probation. This is the arrest citation. You ready? Suspect Garvey was interviewed. Once again, parental guidance here because I'm reading obviously the charge and arrest complaint dealing with somebody who was charged with rape of a 13-year-old. So anyways, sexual warning here. Suspect Garvey was interviewed at the Fort Mitchell Police Department in regards to a complaint that was made involving suspect having sexual intercourse with a 13-year-old female on June 25th, 2021. Victim advised she and the suspect began talking on Snapchat, that she advised him that she was 13 years old. A few weeks later, suspect came to the victim's location. The two met inside his vehicle in the parking lot. Victim states that while in the backseat of Garvey's vehicle, he held her hands down while he penetrated her vagina. Victim advised prior to sexual intercourse, she was told him that she didn't want to do anything sexual and advised him to stop, it hurts. Victim further states she attempted to push suspect away, however, he was on top of her. Garvey admitted to having sexual intercourse with the 13-year-old victim and further stated the victim had performed oral sex prior to sexual intercourse. He's charged with rape, first degree, sodomy, second degree. So it's not just like, oh, he's messing around with a 13-year-old who's way too young, but somehow in some weird warped view, you think a 13-year-old can consent. No, it's literally that he raped a 13-year-old according to the arrest record. And he pled guilty in charges to do with this crime. And what did the judge give him? 5 years probation. He violates probation, 30 days in jail. And we wonder why we keep having all these issues on our streets. It's these soft on crime judges. Look, it's not just in Northern Kentucky. It's awful, and people have died from it. But we have other situations going on all around the state. I mean, we had a woman in Lexington that literally attempted to stab a man, run him over with her car, wrecked her car into a house. Then when first responders showed up, she pulled out of the house, nearly ran over a fire department, first responder from the fire department, was posing such a threat that she was legally shot in the arm from a police officer. She then proceeded to drive away and lead police on an hour-and-a-half long police chase across multiple counties she got 5 years probation. Not a day in jail, 5 years probation. I mean, you got a person who ran a red light going 95 reportedly high, struck a woman, left her there to die, didn't call the police, and ran away from the scene, who had his murder charges dismissed, his manslaughter charges dismissed, because the judge said that the prosecutor, a black female, was racist for charging a black male with the crime. In Louisville, you had a judge let a guy out who had been charged with escape and facilitation of murder within the past several years. He was out on an anklet. He then proceeded to pick up an AK-47 and shoot up a Kroger parking lot, shooting one woman in the leg, steal a car, wreck it on train tracks, and then walk through the middle of downtown. Why was this guy out on an anklet? Why was this guy out of jail? These soft on crime judges are creating a less safe community in Kentucky, period. You are in more danger because of these people. And it also sends a message to everybody else like, do whatever, you don't care. And it creates others to commit crimes. You know, we see a lot of stories talking about how the incarceration rate in Kentucky is so high and it's higher than most countries and yada, yada, yada. Well, when people go out and they commit crimes and they expect there to be no punishment for the crime because they have friends that have gone out and committed crimes as well that then didn't get in any trouble, well, they're going to go out and commit crimes and then they go and find out, there is some consequence. It just depends on the judge you get. If you want people to not do crime, it's really not hard. You punish people for doing crimes. There is no sympathy, there is no compassion in letting violent criminals roam our streets to create more victims. There's nothing there. I mean, 5 years probation for raping a 13-year-old. What world are we living in here? You get more trouble for trespassing in the Capitol on January 6th than you do for raping a 13-year-old. You know, there's a quote from The Anatomy of the State from Murray Rothbard. It says the following: "We may test the hypothesis that the state is largely interested in protecting itself rather than its subjects by asking which category of crime does the state pursue and punish most intensely? Those against private citizens or those against itself?" When you go against the state, you get greater punishments than you get for raping a 13-year-old girl. And you know what? Most of those in the government, they don't particularly care. 6 months from now or so, when legislature's coming back into session, for most of those legislators up there, the fact that a piece of trash judge in Northern Kentucky let this complete and utter animal out onto the street and after committing violent crimes, and it resulted in the death of 4 people, won't matter to them. Or at the best, what you might get is a half-hearted attempt to pass a law. Well, let's pass another crime bill. That's what we'll do. We'll pass another crime bill. That's how we'll fix judges being awful. No, remove them. Send a clear message. If you're soft on crime, you won't remain in office in Kentucky. We're not allowing you. We, as a state whose duty is to protect our citizens, cannot allow judges that let these people out onto the street to exist, because you're not just endangering the community of people that voted for you, you're endangering the entire state. These people travel, and we're not going to continue to allow you to destroy our state and our communities by letting these violent thugs, violent pieces of trash out onto the street. Remove somebody from office for once. Please. How many more people have to die before you do something? I'm not saying do something like, pass a gun control law. I'm not asking you to take rights away from anybody else. All I'm asking you to do is tell judges, if you will not treat violent offenders to the punishments they deserve, you will no longer be a judge, period. That only affects those who are committing the crimes. You know, Eastern Kentucky has a number of issues. In fact, if you actually Google Eastern Kentucky at the time as I'm recording this and look at the last week's headlines, you'll see things like, there's just not any here. A look at Eastern Kentucky's maternity health deserts. Here's another headline. Hunger is a reality for Kentucky communities. Food insecurity requires us to work together. That one from Courier Journal. That one's from the Courier Journal. You'll see other headlines about destigmatizing mental health care and just a list and litany of issues for Eastern Kentucky, but nothing I've seen in any of these articles. In fact, I've never once seen a single story about this. Is people saying, well, you know what would really solve our problems? You know what would really solve things like drugs in our community? When the headlines, a drug smuggling pot in an Eastern Kentucky jail. You know, one of the things you never see them say is, you know, if only we had electric vehicle chargers, our lives would be so much better. If only we had this. But despite that, that hasn't, of course, stopped Beshear from going ahead and, you know, building things like an electric vehicle charger in Hazard, Kentucky, trying to make a big deal about it. And of course, too, it's funny, there was some posts made about this and some people commented, like, Eastern Kentucky has a lot of problems. Having an electric vehicle charger isn't one of them. And the first comment on it, and of course a bunch of people liked the second comment, was, well, people in Eastern Kentucky own electric vehicles. Yeah, I'm sure they do. It's like, you can't talk about electric vehicles and how stupid and silly this whole electric vehicle push is, how it makes no sense. It doesn't help anybody. It's not beneficial to the taxpayer. It's not beneficial to the environment. We don't have the infrastructure for it. We are just blowing and wasting money on these types of things without somebody coming along saying, what do? You hate the future? Oh, people own electric vehicles. People will use that charger. Yeah, I'm sure somebody eventually will use the charger. The point we're all trying to make is there's a lot bigger issues for government to spend its money on that isn't an electric vehicle charger that deals with things they're supposed to be doing, like infrastructure for actual roads or infrastructure for clean water or infrastructure to bring in employers and hospitals and all these other things. And one electric vehicle charger in Hazard, Kentucky ain't it. People can already get to Hazard, Kentucky. They can drive normal vehicles that they put gas in. Yes, the people from California won't go to Eastern Kentucky because they don't have a vehicle charger. Because, you know, we know there's tons of tourism going on from people in California driving their electric vehicles across country to Eastern Kentucky. Yeah, there may be one or two people out there that get into their electric vehicle on the weekends and say, let's drive to a small community that has an electric vehicle charger and plug in. I've heard that argument. I was sitting in a Wilmore City Council meeting, and that was the argument. Let's build this electric vehicle charger, and so that way everybody with electric vehicles in the area, within a certain distance, like, they'll know they can come here, they can plug in, they can shop our local shops and things like that. If that's a decision the local city councils want to make, okay. I think the cost to install these chargers and cost to facilitate it, even just the cost to plug it in, because they're offering a free charger. At the time the discussion was about a free electric vehicle charger, and the cost there for a free electric vehicle charger, let's say it's $30 a month, even $50 a month, $100 a month. Well, how many people are showing up in your town because you have an electric vehicle charger, and then they walk around and not just $100 and that they've spent while their vehicle is charging, but remember, that has to be money back to the taxpayers. Because remember, they call these things investments, something that people make money off of. So in order to make money, you have to generate more than it costs. So how long, I'm not even talking about the cost to build it, just how long with that electric bill of, let's say, $50 a month. Let's just say it's $50 a month. You would have to generate at least a little bit more revenue, a quarter of a job or so, something like that, off of that charger being there. And it's like, okay, two people showed up in town charging their vehicle for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour even. How much are they going to spend? And these aren't thoughts that go through people's mind. They don't think about these things as they spend money on this. And it's not going through the mind of the government. And people pointing this out get chastised as being anti-electric vehicle or anti-progress or something. And it's like, no, you're wasting our money. Can we not just talk about that? Complete waste. I'm talking about a complete waste. Here's a interesting press release I saw out of Bashir dealing with Eastern Kentucky. He announced he's spending $1 billion federal funds in helping internet in rural areas. Now, we've been spending billions and millions and this and that forever on getting electricity, on getting internet into Eastern Kentucky. It seems like a never endless pit of money. And not only that, but just take this one thing. So we know they've spent hundreds of millions on this internet in rural areas before. But let's just pretend this $1 billion is all they're spending, okay? There's easier ways to do this than broadband. Like, broadband is old technology. I've done shows where I've kind of dug into things like, Wi-Fi by electricity was like an option at one point, and then the courts ruled against their ability for co-ops to offer that. And so that kind of killed any kind of advancement in trying to figure out how to offer Wi-Fi over electricity. It's a system where you can just kind of plug a receiver into any outlet and you get Wi-Fi in your house. So that kind of cold water got thrown on that due to that court ruling. So that didn't really get advanced. And so then you got broadband, which you got to run lines and do all these other things. Or in the meantime, while we've been talking about broadband for the last decade, Starlink's come around and offered good speed internet, on average right around 100 megabytes or so per second, which is pretty solid speed. That's broadband speed that's good enough to surf the web, to do literally anything on the internet you'd like to, one person or two, and not really, you can stream Netflix and things with that kind of internet speed. You can get higher, that it goes up and it can peak at 250, but they, according to some data locally is around 100 or so. And of course, as well, if you go to something like Starlink and you say, we as a state are going to offer a program to go ahead and get people online in rural areas off Starlink, they'll end up putting more satellites in the area and hoping up the speed in the area. They'll also work on the startup cost, but let's just say what it is. So it's comparable, it's good internet, it's internet that can be delivered to these areas that don't have any, and it's comparable to broadband. And it's probably more reliable too because, the lines don't go down. So $1 billion they announced they're spending. So let's pretend every single household in Kentucky, that's 1.9 million households, don't have internet. And let's pretend Starlink doesn't give us a deal on the $500 initial price. So you purchase the equipment, and then it's about $100 a month for the internet, comparable to what you'd pay for something like Spectrum. So let's say you just say, here's a voucher, you can spend $500 to buy the Starlink equipment for your home, and they don't cut us a deal, okay? That would cost $950 million. So $50 million short of $1 billion. So literally for just what Bashir announced, just the federal government just now is dumping in. Not to mention the hundreds of millions we've already spent, and this doesn't even guarantee internet access to every single Kentuckian. We could literally provide a voucher to get Starlink to every single household in Kentucky for $50 million less. This is why government sucks at doing these things. This is how they waste our money. And the reason why they keep spending on broadband is because all these states are locked into long contracts where it costs them more to leave the contract than it does to finish it. But if they didn't do that, and they said, look, we're just going to expand out broadband as we add the money or whatever, well, then they would have been able to adapt to new and emerging technologies like Starlink, like satellite internet at good, reasonable speeds, and instantly everybody in Kentucky could be online tomorrow, like within the next few months, online. Final story for today. I've got this situation coming out. So for those of you who listen to the show know, and those of you who know my background know that obviously I was highly involved in the fight about COVID. I was kept open my coffee shop Brewed, and background there, kept open the coffee shop Brewed and in Lexington. And the state came in, they took away my licenses and everything else, gave me back my food license, but they never gave me back my ABC license fully. I had it on a kind of a temporary basis while we were working our way through the court. When I went to move locations because my rent had gone up a pretty significant amount, almost doubling, they wouldn't issue me a new license at a new location because I was working my way through the courts. And so for the last several years, the shop hasn't been opened, and we've been trying to get the ability to have an alcohol license again, working our way through the courts. We recently had one victory in the court of them saying, look, you improperly applied the law, but now they have to go back and have a new hearing applying the law practically. And they have, I think, only like 45 more days to have this hearing, supposedly. And then after they have the hearing, they come to a conclusion. Then we can sue if they say, I still can't have a license. Then we can sue them for that. And then not to mention, too, of course, all the financial damages caused by it. And meanwhile, this has been going on now for, 4 years, coming on 4 years. And a lot of people have moved on. A lot of people forgot about it. Obviously, a lot of Kentuckians reelected Beshear, despite the fact that the vast, vast majority of them disagreed with this COVID fiasco, because the minute the government lets you go back to work, and the minute that government lets you take the mask off your face, and the moment that government lets you go about your life again, keep in mind, you didn't win back your freedoms. They just signed off and said, okay, I guess you can do it again. We'll let you do it. People forgot about it. They moved on. They're like, I'm good. But those ramifications still remain, not just for me, but for other people. We have this Marty Terry. He posted this in the Kentucky Freedom Network. He posted this on June 26th. Okay, so we don't know the outcome of the hearing yet. Or at least I haven't seen the posted outcome. So as we see that, we'll let you know. This from Marty Terry. And he posted this June 26th. He said, I have a third hearing tomorrow at 7 p.m. in Anderson County. The fire department suspended me and demoted me 4 levels for attending a rally in Frankfort in April of 2020. I was not in uniform and not on duty. Please keep me in mind as I fight local tyranny. So it was simply put, it was a rally to open up Kentucky, April of 2020. Business owners and patriots went to Frankfort to ask the government to allow businesses to open back up. But he was attacked by Anderson County and suspended and demoted by their fire department, pushed down. Now, Anderson County's got a real, all of you living in Anderson County listening to this, you need to get involved in your county government, because your county government is just absolutely, from what I've seen, a tire fire when it comes to conservative and when it comes to liberties as well. Because, look, we've had the Anderson County now school situation where we had 2 situations now. We had one Anderson County school situation where the preacher, who was also the principal of a school, said, I'm not going to follow state rules from the state KDE that makes me hide from parents the sexual orientation of their children. Because the Kentucky Department of Education had a rule for a long time, a rule that the legislature kind of went after them on, so they went ahead and changed it, that you would not disclose children's, if children are cross-dressing at school, if they're engaging in all kinds of different odd behaviors at schools, you would not disclose that to the parents. You would not out them to the parents, quote unquote. You would keep it a secret. You conspire with the child to keep it from the parents, which is, obviously a big problem. I mean, it's been said by some other commentators. So I've had the thought myself, and I've said on the show years ago that, it's obvious that LGBTQ, transgender, cross-dressing people, they have high suicide rates. And if your child is suddenly falling into a category of high suicide rate, I think a parent would want to know. And I think Matt Walsh made the point where how long till a kid kills themselves, and they were falling into this LGBTQ category of mental illness, and the parents weren't notified, so they never could get them proper treatment, but the school knew about it and kept it to themselves. How long until that happens? So that was an issue out of Anderson County. Then you also had another issue dealing with the school board, LGBTQ stuff out of Anderson County, involving the guidance counselor allowing romantic rendezvous between two girls in her office because the parents were like, no, you can't see them because you were sneaking around and staying at their house and all kinds of other things without telling us what was going on. So we don't trust you around them. We don't trust you around anybody. No romance for you because you've done broken our trust. You need to go to school and come right home. That was the punishment. And this guidance counselor took it upon herself at Anderson County to go ahead and arrange those romantic rendezvous. Then you also had Kentucky Lantern story about a year ago that covered this. That was about how the library there, the public library there, the librarians insisted on putting up all these LGBTQ displays and putting a lot of books in the libraries that were inappropriate. And when people of the area, when concerned citizens and taxpayers that were funding these books, when they spoke out and said, we don't want this garbage in our library, well, the library said, no, we're going to defend this. We're not doing this anymore. And Kentucky Lantern wrote, no, we're going to keep doing this. Sorry, we're not going to do this, but we're going to keep doing this, defended it. The Kentucky Lantern wrote an article about how the citizens were so angry that the librarians are now packing heat. And now you have the fire department firing a guy for attending a rally 4 years ago about opening up businesses. I'm sure their thing is, well, public health and blah, blah, blah. But you're wrong. You were wrong. They admit they're wrong. They were admitting they made it up. Fauci's literally playing the, it wasn't me. I didn't come up with this game. And yet there's still people out here who are dealing with that lie. And I'm pretty upset about how many people, well, they let us get back to it. Let's just move on with our lives. We don't need to make any permanent changes. Whether that's in the legislature, whether that's citizens, we got to get active. If you want your government back, you got to fight for it, not just sit on your butt the minute the tyranny isn't as obvious. Well, y'all, that's what we got time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. We'll be back here tomorrow. Hope you have a great rest of your day.